Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Monafu. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Canadian Digital Service, a group that's part of the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, and I will be your moderator for today's event. A bit about myself. I've worked in the field of policy innovation in the Government of Canada for the past 8 years, including 3 of those years advancing experimental government across the Government of Canada. While I've recently shifted focus and I'm currently working on digital government, experimental methods, and the great experimentation community we've built over the past number of years continue to have a very special place in my heart. So I'm thrilled to have so many of you with us today. As of this morning, we were at over 1,000 registered participants, 1,024 to be exact. Welcome and thank you again for joining us. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you from Ottawa on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Some of you are no doubt joining us from various parts of this country, and I encourage you to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the territory that you're occupying. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, to make your viewing experience better, we encourage you to disconnect from the VPN if possible and then reconnect to the event. Please note that we have simultaneous interpretation and CART services available to you for this event in French. Please refer to the reminder email you received from the school or visit the V-Expo to learn how to access these features. As this is a 60-minute event, please note that we won't be having a question and answer period at the end of this panel discussion. However, throughout the event, feel free to submit questions you might have by using the bubble-shaped chat icon located at the top right-hand corner of your screen. And even if you don't see your questions appear, rest assured they will be coming our way, and we'll be selecting a couple of those to enhance our discussion. Finally, my colleagues at the Canada School of Public Service have asked me to mention that they have other great events coming up, of course. You can browse the Canada School of Public Service website, or you can register for the school's newsletter to receive the latest updates and offerings. And so with all that out of the way, let's get started for the wonderful event we have planned for today. We are very fortunate to be joined by leaders both in the Government of Canada as well as internationally, sharing with us their firsthand experiences in creating space for employee-led experimentation. So joining us today from Ottawa is Sarah Kennedy, Manager of the Solutions Fund at Health Canada, as well as from London, United Kingdom, Jacopo Gronchi, expert at the Finnish think tank Demos Helsinki. Sarah Kennedy has been with the Solutions Fund program at Health Canada since its inception and launch in 2018. With the support of her wonderful team, she works to cultivate a workplace conducive to experimentation and innovation through supporting employee-led initiatives. Since joining the Federal Public Service in 2009, Sarah has led a variety of internal service redesign projects, all aimed at improving collaboration and client service delivery. She has built networks that continue to support each other, and there are now integral partners of the fund contributing to its success. Sarah is passionate about the innovation and experimentation space, you will see that, and welcomes any opportunity to share learnings and collaborate. And Jacopo Gronchi works as an expert in transformative governance at Demos Helsinki, a nonprofit independent think tank researching and consulting on societal transformations. In addition to this, Jacopo is currently a PhD candidate at University College London's Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose, and I'm a big fan of that institute. His research and professional interests revolve around the role of public sector organizations in accelerating societal transformations by means of decentralized experimentation. He has explored these topics by working closely with national governments in Finland, public agencies such as Business Finland, private companies like Meta Open Loop, as well as global foundations. So welcome to you both. All right. I will be done speaking in just a second, but I'll just situate us a little bit. So the term experimentation, particularly in a public sector context, can sometimes have negative connotations, bringing to mind everything from uncertainty and risk to failed social experiments. But we would argue experimentation should not be scary. To offer just a simple definition, experimentation is both a lens as well as a tool. It is a lens for exploring problems and a tool for testing and de-risking innovations. If there's one thing I've learned over the years working in this field is that experimentation quickly becomes theoretical and eyes glaze if we don't provide examples of what we mean in practice. So let's dive in, and I'll start with an easy first question. What is employee-led experimentation? And can you give us some examples? We'll start with you, Sarah.
Employee-led experimentation. Big question. It's employees. It's leading the charge. It's providing the time, the space, the resources for employees to tackle the persistent problems, to support Canadians. Employees are the problem solvers, and they work often on the side of their desks. Experimentation, or the experimentation innovation space, allows employees to try new things on a small scale. It's safer, and it makes a safer way to make change, just like what you just said, right? At Health, when we were setting up this innovation experimentation space back about 2017, beginning of 18, we had Deputy Kennedy, who was our fearless leader. And he said, we have a lot of talented people in the organization, highly skilled, highly educated people who are close to the action and providing the service to Canadians. They have the visibility on the things that could work better and what should be improved. And he was right. So we created those spaces to allow employees to do that. Employees are everyone, right? So a director is an employee, a CR2, CR4, whatever level, whatever place you're in, you're an employee of the government of Canada. So everybody has the responsibility to do work in this space. I don't think it's just a level thing. I don't think it's an area thing. If you're a scientist versus a policymaker versus an administrative, I think we all have a role in this, and we all have the ability to take these tools in the innovation experimentation space and apply it to the work we do to make change. So employee innovation experimentation is employees doing it. It's employees.
Okay, so that's the emphasis. Do you wanna start with like one example or two, or do you want to leave that for later? Okay.
Okay. I have an example. Okay. We have a team here in our health food products branch. They are scientists, chemists. They have a huge issue, and they wanted to see how machine process learning, AI, could work to help solve a problem they were having. They're not data scientists in their field. They're not IT specialists, but they decided, okay, we have this problem. We need to solve it. So they went and learned. They took courses. They learned how to, what was needed, and they applied it to their work, and they developed an experiment for test. They did this on their own initiative because they saw that there was potential to solve this problem and to augment their work and to create a better systems approach and design to what they were doing. And that is employee-led innovation. You know, it's the desire, the mindset, and the willingness to fix things that aren't working so well. And we have a lot of people with this mindset, and we have a lot of people doing it. It's just that some have spaces and some don't have those defined spaces. And, you know, we need to celebrate and highlight that more, I think, in general.
Okay, thank you for that. Jacopo, any first thoughts on your end on the definition and some examples?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for the introduction, and thank you, Sarah. It's very hard to go on top of that because I think that the word employee exactly gives up the value that experimentation have, not only to find out what works, but also to tap into the human wisdom that they have, and that they have by gathering firsthand knowledge of what it takes in a way to implement policies, programs, to understand how to fit them from the theory on paper to the practice of human needs that are diverse, that are scattered across communities, and that need to be contextualized in order to fit public purpose, so to speak. But maybe if I can add something, it's also about the possibility that experimentation entails to test new things. So to tap not only into wisdom and contextual knowledge, but also to tap into creativity, power to create. Also because rarely the way we do things is not the best. or we can improve them incrementally. But sometimes tapping into experimentation and the creativity that lies within public service is also a way to radically challenge them on their very basis and rationale and design. And to substantiate this definition, I may go through very quickly 3 examples that go from the micro level to the macro. So one concerns, for example, everyday tasks in public service. Let's see, for example, teaching. In Finland, we have a national agency of education that enabled teachers exactly from their ground level perspective to play a substantive role into changing the curriculum at the national level. For example, with respect to topics that range from indoor or outdoor teaching, external curricular activities, but also relationship to emerging technologies for education. And what happened is that the benefits that you get not only concerns child education, which also led Finland to be among the best countries in the world for that field, but also for teachers themselves that learn how to relate technologies and have an empowered sense of agency into shaping them to fulfill their mandate. The second example expands the focus from the everyday task of teaching to public services management as a whole. And this, of course, concerns not only the implementation aspect, but also the design. And one good story about it, for example, is taken from the UK, where the behavioral insights team, once implementing a big unemployment scheme through decentralized job center officials, basically reworked the assumptions behind the program themselves. The original program in itself had a focus on basically inducing reporting from the unemployed about why they were such and what they would have tried to do a job. And they felt that that was not empowering for the recipients of the service themselves. So what they did and what they convinced their own directors in a way to test at a small scale and eventually at a broader scale once the experiment had success was to basically turn the negative into a positive, basically ask them what they like to do in their job, what would be the purpose they would like to fulfill. And this is something that worked out, that was tested through randomized controlled trials, and where it scaled up from the bottom level to the top one with success. But this is not only about improving the existing, it's also about dealing with the new. And this is my last example. It's about engaging with new societal phenomena. For example, migrations. We have beautiful examples still in Finland. For example, in our immigration office, Migri, which dealt with new technologies in order to empower, for example, newcomers during the first war in Ukraine back in 2014, 2015, to basically help them be without paper and leveraging blockchain to create a new methodology for them to basically tap into new ways to dealing with bureaucracies, receive funding for support, and so forth. These are only a few examples, but they give an idea of how this goes from tackling very specific problems that stand in everyday life to broader challenges that affect our societies as a whole, and how public servants can relate to that.
Yeah, thank you both. I think those are, there's a range of examples there. I'd love to hear a little more about them as we go along. I've heard a few sort of keywords, and some of them are, sort of giving folks license and giving them agency and giving, creating possibility and, creativity. So how do we create the right conditions for employees to get to places like that? Are there specific, sort of ingredients or conditions that we need to create in order to get them to those moments? I don't know, Sarah, do you wanna start?
Yeah, and this was a big question when we were setting up our space, our innovation experimentation space at Health Canada. Is like, what is the right recipe, I guess you could say, or right? And the literature, right? You go back to the doers, those who are doing it well, those who have done it before, you learn from, and that's basically what we're trying to do, is like learn from and build onto, right? Evidence-based. So it's creating that space for it requires leadership support. We're government, we're a bureaucracy. We have directive, we have mandates. We are begotten to Canadians, right? And so we need to have that voice that says you have permission. You have our support to do this. With that permission, it then says, okay, so what does this look like? What does this look like for me versus what does that look like for you? It's not going to be a one size fits all for every department and agency, obviously, but it's there. So at Health Canada, we had our since, Deputy Kennedy moved on, then Deputy Lucas came in. We were so blessed because he had come from ECCC, and he said, innovation and experimentation are more than buzzwords, they're mindsets. They're about being open to taking risks, showing curiosity, exploring new ways of doing things. Encouraging a workplace to be more conducive to innovation is a management priority. So from that, we created a framework. So we engaged our communities, we engaged our employees, we engaged those outside of our organization, inside our organization, in private sector and public sector. And we created this framework that kind of said, okay, here's the formula for our department. We have the learn and act, which is the capacity building. Go learn, go be part of it. The explore and test, which is the doing. Get your hands dirty, try new things. And then the report, measure, and share. Tell us what you learned. Tell us where we can learn off of. Where's the evidence-based decision making? There's accountability from the organization down, and there's accountability for the employees to take these opportunities and do it and be a part of that. And this framework is the permission slip. It's the go and do. And so what's happened here at our department is we have strategic plans being built off of the framework, like in HEX and in CFOB at Health Canada and the regulatory branch. We have pockets of, innovation centers being developed in branches. We have the fund, the solutions fund, which is here for employee experimentation. So we have resources. We have the learning opportunities, the resources to go learn, the resources to do the doing, and then we have those mechanisms to put in place. And so by creating this ecosystem, by creating that permission slip, by creating those things, then you see more doing. In 2020, we had 20 innovation experimentation projects, more in the innovation. In 2022, we just did an environmental scan. We have 40 projects being done. So we are growing, we're maturing. We are learning that it's a good thing to do, and that it's supporting our objectives of getting evidence-based decision making, using the public purse appropriately, solving the problems in a concerted way, not just solving them to fit into something that doesn't work, right? We're seeing the fruits of this. And we have projects happening as a result of COVID. So, we had to act fast at health. So by having these examples and by having these in place, we were able to act fast. By having solutions fund projects, doing this work, we're learning when to fail fast. We had a voice technology project who came in and set up, and they learned very quickly that we're not supposed to be in that space at this time, and so failing quickly. Those are examples of the doing and the benefits of having the space, being allowed to fail, happy failures we call them, and moving on, building off of them. So yes, I'm all over the place, but the conditions are resources, permission, mindset, learning opportunities, and sharing.
Yeah,
you know?
I especially the last one. I think closing that feedback loop is something that I think was always people kind of forget. They kind of want to move off to the next thing, but I think if we don't embed those things in the organization so that the next generation learns from them, it's lost a bit. So I want to turn to Jacopo. Tell us a little bit of what you're seeing. Like Sarah just mentioned the many things happening just in one place, but I'd love to hear what you're seeing in terms of sort of these ingredients or conditions internationally.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Sarah already described quite well my points. I would have said culture, I would have said leadership, I would have said skills and tools, and also support. And what I would basically argue, if I look also internationally, is that basically what we are doing right now into having this conversation is partially changing that culture. And tapping into the global conversation and understanding where are we, understanding that this is something that can be done and that is being done elsewhere is also a way to get aware of it and start having conversations such as this one that start fostering different kinds of mindset throughout the organizations of the people that are joining us today, values of critical thinking, values of autonomy, learning, and eventually experimentation. And maybe one thing on top of them all, which is also a recurrent word at Demos Helsinki, which is humility. An assumption behind it is that it is important to say aloud that not only there is something wrong into pretending that failure can be problematic, but there is something positive into basically making clear that there is a ethical assumption that can become part of the tools of the rationales for public intervention, and that can also be reflected into everyday agency and action in how one and each one interprets its own work in the daily basis. So this is something that, of course, leaders can do quite well by saying that not only it is okay to fail, but it's certainly welcome to be humbled. And we are eager to be humble into engaging you and understanding what are the learnings that we can get from you to revise our own assumption about what might work and what does not. But it's also the capability in a way to tap into external knowledge once one recognizes that there are no clear ways forward for tackling a given problem. So reaching out to each other, sharing the problem, understanding what might be the different feasible hypotheses for going forward, and eventually also leveraging the web and different tools, because there are already plenty of toolkits, playbooks that present canvases, system mapping exercises, workshop methodologies that can already be taken basically off the shelf and be used in everyday work within public agencies in order to learn how to be experimental in practice. And of course, we'll go back also to the question of support. But eventually, this is something that while materializing into seeds in different parts of a broad public sector, which is of course scattered, decentralized among multiple agencies and levels, once these seeds grow up, eventually they also tap into experiments such as the Solutions Fund, innovation labs, as we see internationally, or experimentation units, as we've seen, for example, in Finland during the last decades, that also help eventually systematize, put into an institutionalized perspective the learnings that emerge from experimentation, and also make them spill over and diffuse the mindset. If you do that, if you're able to tap into that energy from the bottom up and to institutionalize it at the top, then what you get, for example, in the case of Finland, is that one single unit, even managed by 3 to 4 people, if placed at the right strategic level, such as it happened in Finland, with 3 or 4 people working, results into 20 to 25 experiments at a strategic level across different ministries. And if you look also beyond government and into society, more than several hundreds of experiments being done at the local level by civic associations, private companies even, and so forth, which is what happened in Finland during the last 10 years.
Thank you for that. I love the emphasis on humility. I think as soon as you sort of start creating your hypothesis, your assumption, you realize how small you have to go to test something. You can't. You have to realize how all of the elements that you're just sort of ignorant of in a sense. So thank you for that reminder. I want to go back to Sarah. You mentioned the Solutions Fund, and I'd like to for folks joining in that maybe are not at Health Canada, don't have the good fortune of having a Solutions Fund. How what should public servants do in those situations where they don't have a ready made access to a support system?
This is a question that we get asked, a lot. So first, I'm going to put the caveat is that we're very blessed here at Health Canada. We're fortunate that we're a science-based organization. We're kind of set up to do this. And when we do innovation, experimentation, design, we're really linked to project management, and it's a very organic and natural space to be in, investment planning, project management. At some departments, that's not the mandate, right? You look at Heritage, they're doing things really well, but they're not meant to do scientific problem sets, right? So we're not a one size fits all, but Solutions Fund, or the idea of a lab or a center or a space, that's something that can happen. And I asked this question today to one of my project teams. I said, what do you need? They said, and he said, first, we need someone to listen to us. So we need someone to listen to the fact that we want something or we have an idea. Okay. The second thing that what we need as teams, if we want to do this, if a team really wants to do this, they need to start asking. And when they get a no, they need to ask the next person. And then they need to ask the next person. But you know what worked for us? And this is where I'm going to highlight, Dan. When we were setting up the Solutions Fund, we were, senior management needed to kind of wrap their head around this new thing. It was really new. It was very conceptual. And we were having a hard time getting it across like the finish line here. So we did a call a friend. We called Dan and Sarah at Treasury Board at the Experimentation Works team, and we said, come over, come to us, and let's talk this through. Let them hear from your experience. Let them understand what we're trying to achieve. So that's the call a friend method. So I would say you need mindset, you need the willingness, the entrepreneurial spirit, the drive to do this work in that space. You need to develop your call of friends. I'm a friend. Call Health Canada, call Experimentation Works, call the Chief Digital Office, call ESDC's lab. We're all over the place. We're on each other's GC tools pages. I know GC tools, but that we're all over the place. You just have to connect the dots and call us. We put our socks on the same way you put your socks on. We're no better. We're humble. We're very humble. Meeting as someone who wants to be in this space can actually lend to us doing more in our spaces. So we open that. So if you want to do this, first, you need the mindset. You need to have the curiosity, the willingness to do it, and the willingness to say, okay, that person doesn't want me. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there. A door will open. And then, of course, you need the resources, the leadership, and all that other stuff, and that will come. But, if you want to be in this space or you want to trying doesn't cost anything. You don't need a lot of money to try. You don't need a lot of resources to do things. The Solutions Fund has been run on 3 resources or less for 5 years. You could do it. It's the friends, it's the community you build around it, it's the support structure to get it off the ground. It's a movement, right? You only need one person to start a movement. Is that like that video that went around a couple years ago? So that's what you need. But yeah, so Treasury Board saved us. The Experimentation Works saved us and got us going, put our best foot forward. So let us all help you put your best foot forward if that's what you want to do.
Thank you for the nod there, Sarah. I wasn't. She mentioned that I'll get a mention when we chat, but I didn't know exactly how. So I'm glad it's positive. So I appreciate
super,
that.
super positive.
I wanna. So I think on the we heard a little bit about resourcing. Jacopo, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the mindset piece a little more. So if we talk about experimentation as a lens, and it allows there's a Nesta resource that went around in the space that sort of said, okay, exploring what if and what could be type questions. So how can governments use this mindset to arrive at more long-term goals or more complexity, right? Because I think there's a difference between sort of trying something at a small scale and then sort of using this mindset to get at more and more complicated goals. How have you seen that play out in some spaces?
Absolutely. And I would say that the connection between even the smallest of experimentation processes and the longer term goals that the governments are grappling today, such as climate change, for example, in these very moments, are at least threefold. And first one, I would say, is a kind of very blatant, if you think about it, but very crucial to how public action is devised, which is the complexity of implementation itself. 2 great political scientists, Jeffrey Pressman and Aaron Wildavsky, once wrote a beautiful book in the 80s, which is called Implementation, and focuses on a massive urban employment scheme implemented in the USA in 1966. And the results of the policy process itself are very much well told by the subtitle of the book, which is basically how great expectations in Washington are dashed in Oakland, or why it's amazing that federal programs work at all. This is basically an argument, the one that they put forward, for street-level bureaucrats' relevance into pursuing any kind of goal, not only longer term, but even in the short term. This is because much of the implementation truly happens at the ground level. Policies and programs are often designed from the top down of governments and then maybe refined through secondary or tertiary legislation, but eventually they do embed elements of ambiguity that need to be solved out and figured out by civil servants on the ground. And this is where exactly the challenge of implementation turns out. This is where also great expectations can be let down in a way. Understanding that employees are not just machines that receive inputs and put out outputs, but that actually have the knowledge that is critical to deliver and adjust the programs to the actual needs is essential to pursue any kind of goal. So this is the first complexity that needs to be understood and leveraged at all levels of governments, I believe, in order to understand the crucial role of experimentation and how it can help us achieve effective public action. The second one is about the complexity of today's wicked problems that add a further layer of complexity into basically helping us acknowledge that we don't know, none of us arguably knows in depth how to shift, for example, from a linear to a circular economy. None of us knows or has full visibility on how to reform our welfare states in a growingly aging societies. We might have ideas, but we need to test them out in order to understand. And this is where, once again, experimentation as a mindset comes out, and because it helps us embrace eventually that we do lack the knowledge about the nature and the feasibility of our hypothetical solutions, and enables us to throw the art beyond the obstacles, as we do say in Italy, and start solving the problems together, which is the key, the true essence of learning and moving forward towards the goal, long-term or short-term problem solving. Final element, fostering a culture of humility is important not only as something that substantiates civil service ethos, but also that creates dynamic capabilities, as we call them, into UCL IIPP. It creates basically the state capacity for actors to adjust to the problems, such as, for example, Sarah was telling beforehand with respect to the pandemic. It creates greater resilience across the whole of government to adapt to different and even unforeseen needs. And this is also a benefit of experimentation, basically empowering employees to be better at their job and at adapting to different circumstances together.
Thank you. I know we talked about before the session. We talked a little bit about making sure that we keep the focus away from the system and on the employee. So thank you to the audience for kind of keeping us grounded. We got a very practical question from the audience. So let's see how we do. So how quickly should we be failing? What kind of time frame should we be looking at? Should we fail, a few weeks, a month or so, and longer? I think you can take that question in a few different directions of, should we continually be failing every month and moving on? Or I don't know if anything comes to mind from that. Jacopo, maybe we'll go with you first.
Yeah, sure. It truly depends on the problem at hand, of course. There are programs that last decades and programs that last years, or they're even tested out on a monthly basis. So it truly depends on context and at the same time on the degree on the type of learning that you want to tap into. Sometimes the programs go through revisions. Sometimes they are explicitly being piloted. So they do last for a certain amount of time that is basically designed by the system. But this is something that eventually at the very micro level of everyday's job can also happen on a daily basis, like even holding meetings or weekly scrums in different ways is part of experimenting. And this is something of an internal sense-making process and shared collective learning about how to best run an organization that can truly be tapped into besides RCTs and pilots and how they work. And this can happen on a daily basis, I believe. But of course, it also depends on the challenge at hand, and this can take also many years, of course, to make sense of complex, for example, programs. So
Sarah, you call them happy failures. Tell us more.
Happy failures. Well, okay, so this is really interesting, and I'm going to talk about happy failures, but I want to say that This is where good governance and oversight comes in. So we have at Health, we've set up a governance structure to not be so like heavy, you must do, and where's your green light, red light, orange light kind of like outcomes, but to be more of like that body that asks those questions, to say, to the challenge function, to say, how are you doing this? Why are you failing? What do you need? Is it because we didn't provide you with something you needed? Or is it because you didn't know what you didn't know? Or is it because it's just a bad idea? So having that oversight and governance body that's more of a coaching mechanism and a sounding board is how we determine when to fail, when to say, yep, we failed. We're failing great. We're failing happily. And that's why they're happy failures, because they're not risky. They're not epic. They're manageable. It's not a good feeling to say, cut the cord, we're done. But it's okay in this space because it's set up and designed to receive it and do that, right? And by having this oversight and this governance mechanism, it allows the public purse to be used properly. It allows the department to have that oversight that it needs to make the decisions and the evidence, but it also allows the coaching and the mindset and everything to be done in the safe place. Because when you're doing the work, so say that voice project that I was talking about, if they hadn't come to us they might have just kept going because they thought maybe they wanted us to keep going, because that's a cultural norm in a lot of departments. But by having the check-ins, by having that governance body to have these conversations, we were able to say, try one more thing, and if that doesn't work, let's cut it. Let's just stop, and let's take that money that wasn't spent and put it in a different spot, and that is important. So there is no right way to fail. There is no right time to fail. There is no road, like there's no formula, but having the community around you to support you in that space, I think is really, really important. And we've learned that. So, we've had our number of failures in our department in the experimentation innovation space. We've had a lot of failure, and that's great. We want to see that. We want to see that because then we pivot. Let's use these words. We pivot. We change course. We set up a new experiment, and we move on, right? And that's the benefit of this space. That is the biggest benefit, And when you guys wrote the directive on experimentation, that was clearly outlined in there. We want a space where you succeed to get evidence-based decision makings and you move on, and we want a space where we can fail on small scale. And we're moving out of small scale experimentation to higher impact. So we're hoping to take those learnings of failing, and so we could put them in higher impact projects. I think that's where we're at in the iteration. So that's my answer to that for now.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think one of my insights from my time sort of on the file was creating space and almost depoliticizing the outcome so that it's not a big deal if it doesn't work, and also sort of saying, well, this is normal. It was part of the plan. We tested this, which takes away some of that tension that comes with saying, this is public money, and this was a reasonable hypothesis that a bunch of folks that made an educated guess about. So I think that's key. The depoliticization of the experiments is an important one, because otherwise you run into sort of political problems, small p.
The other thing is to mention, because this is employee led, there's employees in all levels, like wherever they come from doing this work. Reprisal is not part of this because we're building it into our ecosystem, into the way we do things. People working in this space, and this is what we hope to cultivate through our fund and through employee-led experimentation innovation at Health Canada, is that we're giving you the space to make mistakes, to learn and grow from them. It's not a place of reprisal. Like, it's not like you're going to be seen or your career is going to end because you failed. If anything, it's going to help you develop the person you are, your skill sets, to bring forth your next thing that you do, and to make you a better public servant, to make you a better, in your position that you're in. So we see it as happy, as good, as productive, and not as negative. We're trying to dispel all that too.
There's another question from the audience that Sarah, I think is more or less touches on your side. So it goes something like, often regional employees are very operational and many problem-solving activities are reactive. Given these circumstances, have you been able to integrate regional employees into the experimentation work?
Yes, we have. Everyone's welcome. Our teams are regional. The regulatory enforcement branch has a lot of regional employees. They're our biggest experimentation project source at Health Canada, one of our biggest. So, the regional lens is really important. Are we doing the best? No. Could we do better? Of course. But we want the regional perspective. So we have projects right now. We have a video gaming project looking at Ontario, like the Ontario region, and work that they're doing with students to educate them on environmental health hazards, as an example, right? So the Ontario region has a project in the Solutions Fund. We have collaborative teams from, Labrador, Newfoundland, BC, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, that are all on one team. So, we're trying to have the regional perspective as well as regional focus projects. So bring them on, bring it on. I mean, it's not out of scope, but we always could be doing better with regional integration in all the work we do. But maybe that could be a Solutions Fund project. How do we do it better?
Jacopo, have you? Because I think the broader level question for internationally would be, what do you do if you don't have a central team in a national office or federal, federated space? Can you work in a decentralized way, and have you seen ways to integrate those so that the learnings are actually captured and they don't sort of get lost?
Well, it is very hard in a way to accumulate learnings at that level, but this does not mean that collaboration between different parts of government cannot happen. I would say that definitely tapping into different kinds of networks, both within government, but also beyond government, looking at other public agencies internationally, but also different societal actors, for example, universities that do provide the capacity in a way to make sense of the learnings and spread them out, is a good initiative that can help in a way ensure that some of that experience is not lost, that something of that is translated into real impacts or narratives that can even be spread out either through academia or through public service or through citizens themselves in order to make sure that the movement in itself goes on in a way. Of course, being the first movers in any context is very difficult, but there are partners. They are very much everywhere, and some of them are into this conversation. So let's tap into them to make that happen.
All right. I'll switch gears a little bit here. So another question. One of the central tenets of behavioral science is to sort of change the default. So make it easy to do the right thing. At the same time, some folks still consider that experimentation is hard. They don't know where to start. So can you think of sort of the behaviors and the strategies that whole teams can adopt to make experimentation kind of baked in, we called it, or kind of normal as part of their workflow? Are there ways to do that aside from sort of having all of the resourcing and the strategies and the top cover? Anything else comes to mind in that sense? I don't know, Sarah.
It's really hard to run an RTC on the side of your desk, especially without like all the skills or knowledge or, maybe the academic background. But I think that, you can start small scale. A lot of the, I learned small scale. I'm growing in my mindset and in my understanding of this space on a daily basis. And so I think it starts with being creative. What is our problem? Problem solving, thinking outside the box. What else is being done? Being curious, researching, be well informed. Take some courses. What is design thinking? What is user experience? What are these things, these innovative practices or these methodologies? Take an incremental approach. Take a really small problem and work through it one time. See how that works out. Then take a bigger problem and work through it. Talk it through with your colleagues in your area. Talk it through with others. Seek horizontal support. Okay, someone's trying it or someone's doing it. And I think that's what you're talking about. We've been talking about, is it internationally? Is it provincially? Is it my neighbor in a different branch in my department? Is it a different department in itself? What has been done? Ask questions, and that's the call a friend model too. So, or leverage things. So right now, I was saying that we have that video gaming project. Health Canada is not specialists in video games. Like, we're not. We want to use game-based learning to inform and educate students on environmental health hazards, and gaming has been identified as a way to do it. But how do we build a game? How do we do it? So we called CSPS. They have the people. So we're doing a horizontal partnership to run a test and experiment in this space. We alone can't do it. We need to call on our friends and our partners. So that's really, really important. Don't compare yourself either. Don't compare yourself. Focus on what you need to do and how you need to do it, and stay in that space. Because if we always compared ourselves, we never go anywhere, right? Like we'd always be in that churn, on that hamster wheel. So, those are kind of the elements, for behavior change: mindset, the desire to do it, taking the leap of faith, calling a friend, connecting with others to do it, humble thyself. Our team says that all the time. So glad you said that. Humble yourself. Don't compare. Just try and do. Just try it. I don't know what. Just do it.
Anything to add on that inspirational message, Jacopo?
The aspirational message is a part and parcel of it, and I feel the moment when this starts becoming normal is exactly when this becomes part of a movement. So I would definitely say that, as recalling Sarah's advice before, in order to make that happen, you need sometimes, depending on the context, make the first step, but sometimes also make use of the resources that you have already at hand. And there are infinite canvases, as I was explaining before, that can already model in a way the way you tackle a certain problems. For example, we used Canvas for devising different incentives for local governments to participate into experimentation with the Philippines Environmental Protection Agency, in order basically to understand their own needs and adapt also the presuppositions behind the policies that we were helping them to deploy in order to make that happen. And there are tested methodologies that, for example, other parts of government, but also external consultants such as demos can make use of, and they can also be relayed, but they are also available on the internet as freely, and they can be used every day in order to make that happen, and they provide standardized approaches to do so. And another example, for example, relates to the Latvian civil service, where we had managed the transition from offline to online throughout the pandemic, and their experimentation canvases were basically used to split different communities into working groups, understanding different needs. For example, employees that had elderly people living at home, people with low digital literacy, and basically helping them provide with new ways of thinking about how to adapt to each specific circumstances, their own job. So this looks difficult, but it's also very playful, and it can become as such once you exactly make use of these resources that are broadly available, and they can also tap into by either making the first step, getting in touch with peers that have already initial experience with it, or seeking them out, because the world is plenty of them. And I think that all of us are very available to share some of these experiences further, also beyond this event in itself. So,
thank you both. So one interesting question I've been sort of toying with is this idea of, is experimentation, is it a must-have, or is it something that you can sort of do in a corner and it's optional? And I want your gut reaction. So maybe 1 minute or less. Tell me why. If on other side where you fall. Sarah, let's go to you.
It's a must. That's it, hands down. It's a must. So we've seen it. We've seen the fruits of the labor that has happened here. Evidence-based decision making creates better change, makes rapid implementation. We've seen how these small-scale attempts and successes at experimentation can yield a better return on investment. You want me to give you the business case? I can do that. You want me to give it on the capacity building? We have, experimentation and having this in your department, in your agency, in the work that you do, people's capacity, transferable skills are real, right? And they can make big incremental change. Having that learning, that knowledge base, it can be applied when employees do their work, when they move on. It's incremental everywhere. We have a tendency of we said bureaucratic, the politicizing of it. This is taking it down to actually solving a problem and not making it political. And I think that we've seen how that is a good thing. We see how evidence supports the political. It helps our decision makers. It helps our senior leaders make better informed decisions. It makes them confident in their employees. It's a win-win-win. What is that? Win-win-win. So I would say must, definitely, hands down, must.
Jacopo.
Of course, I cannot disagree. And I cannot disagree for many reasons. It helps us know what works and what doesn't. It is a good vehicle for engaging stakeholders to co-create together policies, programs, services to increase their legitimacy on the ground, not only within government, to increase the coherence and effectiveness of public action, but also its relatability to everyday citizens' problems in itself. It is good for employees themselves because it empowers them to take an active stance and to own the job that they do rather than receive orders and translate them into action. And it increases also their relevance. It increases their status and maybe even in broader terms, expanding on the narrative that experimentation can hold on for public service is a part of also shifting how we perceive civil service as a whole as a key element of our societies. Last but not least, it is essential to implementation because if you don't experiment, that's how eventually you get great expectations in Washington, get dashed in Oakland. And we don't want that to happen. Experimentation is essential to that, and this is why it is a must.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our session, and I have one final question, which is kind of the usual. Okay, so now what? Where do we go from here? And I think we could take it. Pick what you want from that, but a couple of rapid fire, including one from the audience that I think is relevant. So, who should participants talk to if they want to experiment? Where can they get support? And I think the final bit on now what, say you've actually done a successful experiment. How do you scale for impact beyond that point? So final thoughts, I'll start with you, Jacopo.
Yeah, that's the moment where you need basically to pull learnings from different parts of the ecosystem and start making them visible. This is usually done through political support eventually and by creation of a unit that is dedicated to that. I'm also partially skeptical, to be honest, after seeing 15 years of experimentation in the public sector innovation trend, that sometimes they can be the solution for broad transformations of government. But this is the best that we can do so far. And this is already quite enough because it can provide tangible results. And I'm sure that in 10 years also, we see government all over the world start looking very much differently, thanks to the experiences of the first comer that are sometimes very visible, such as in the case of the Solutions Fund, but sometimes hidden beneath procedures and internal work, but that are actually present across different administrations. So that's how you scale it. It takes time, but it's part of being a movement. So it goes through ups and downs. And overall, the journey, looking at the 10 years in the past, looks like that this ethos is shifting and slowly becoming something that is substantive to governments as a whole. So there's no reason not to believe into it.
Wonderful. Sarah?
So I'm going to start with the scaling and then I'm going to say how to. So the scaling is the thing we're actually working on right now, because the Solutions Fund, when we were put in place, it was like, maybe we'll be here for a year. Maybe we'll be here for 2 years. We don't know. You have to plan for it. So you have to plan for the idea that if successful, what then? What do we have the resources in place for that, for the scale up? Do we have the ability to do that? So that has to be worked into your experiment, and to actually plan for success, plan for the scaling up of the evidence-based, the things that we work towards. So we're doing that now. We're transitioning into that space now, and the how it's coming along, and I think everyone can do that. But I think good planning, good discussions, always bringing it forward, keeping it relevant, keeping it, keeping it on top of mind will keep it in that 10-year space and not in that, oh, we once did that once long ago, right? So that's my one thing there. But the second thing is, how do you do this? Call us, call Dan, call Sarah, call all of us, call demos, call Treasury Board Experimentation Works team, call us, start somewhere. We can always lend the next step or give our advice. We're coaches as much as we are doers. And we want this space to grow. We believe in this space. We care about this space. We see the benefits of this space. So we'll help you. I mean, we don't have the answers. We can't do it for you, but we can get you on the right path to starting doing it for yourselves. But join, everybody. This is not a cool kid club. This is an everybody club. This is for everyone. So call Dan, call me, Sarah Kennedy.
You want to add something, or are you just giving us the phone number where to call you?
Well, I can do that, and I'll be very glad to. And what I was about to say was exactly to specify that Demos Helsinki has been working in this space for the last 15 years, doing capacity building courses, either short-term or long-term, all over the world. And we are experienced with basically understanding what are the issues of navigating change within different public administrations. And we are very happy, of course, to get in touch across different parts of the world in order to make that happen. We have publications going on, actually making visible that there is a changing ethos in civil service, and wisdom born out of experimentation is one of the 4 characteristics that we put forward. So if you want to get in touch, please feel free to do that. We are looking for partners to make the movements grow. Just wanted to echo Sarah's words on that.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you both. I think we're at time here. I will have a couple of final concluding remarks here, but I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I think the trouble every time we talk about experimentation is just that an hour is very insufficient to get going. So if this is our plug for the Canada School to continue this series, there's many elements and sub-elements that the experimentation as a field can bring. It's a very sort of meaty topic, and I just want to thank you both for your enthusiasm and your participation, and I want to thank the audience for their questions. And like I think both of you have said, experimentation and innovation are not buzzwords. They are emerging fields with a lot of substance, with excellent practitioners, with experts, and with a vibrant and growing community of practice, not only internationally, but also right here in the Government of Canada. So if you feel like you've found your people with this presentation and what you've heard today resonated, I'd encourage you to get involved, to stay involved. And as Sarah and Jacopo both mentioned, you can start small. You don't have to feel like you have to have a fancy innovation practitioner title to engage in this work and to meaningfully make things better for the people you serve. I think that's sort of the final reminder that this is what it's all about, making things better for our citizens. And we should keep that top of mind. As I mentioned at first, the school has many more events to offer you, so check their website to register for future learning opportunities, including in this exciting space of innovation experimentation. And we hope that you enjoyed this event. We'd like to hear your feedback on how it went, so please take a moment to fill out the e-survey. You'll be getting an email from the school in a few days with it. And that is it from me. Thank you all again for joining us today. Until next time.